present Genius, taking a hit from the Logic Bomb. Here's your host, Dave Gorman.
Hello, I'm Dave Gorman and welcome to Genius, the show all about your ideas. Every week, a celebrity guest and I examine a selection of ideas, be they gadgets, gizmos, inventions, policies, plots or plans, on the lookout for that elusive quality, genius. The ideas have been sent to us by you, the Radio 4 listeners, and I'm pleased to say that they have arrived at Genius HQ in their thousands. Many of them do have at least the whiff of genius about them, but others leave us feeling, well, confused. A listener called Carl Anderson wrote us an email saying, "Carrots! Most people think of them as just a vegetable side dish, but I think there's more to them than that. They taste pleasingly sweet to me, and while I haven't tried this yet, I'm convinced they could be used to make a passable cake." Please take this seriously. I'm not mad. No, Carl, you're not mad. You've just never been to a cake shop. Obviously, an idea like that isn't going to make the show for fear of insulting our guest. I'm delighted to say we have our first real-life professor. He is the visiting professor of broadcast media at Oxford University. Oh, and in his various capacities as a producer, writer and performer, he's responsible for some of the most successful and groundbreaking comedy of recent times. From The Day-to-Day to Knowing Me, Knowing You, from I'm Alan Partridge to The Thick of It, from the Armando Iannucci Show to Armando Iannucci's Charm Offensive. Ladies and gentlemen, the genius that is, Professor Armando Iannucci. Thanks for joining us, Professor. I'm very excited to hear of any genius ideas you might have had recently.
I've come up with one idea which I think gets rid of the one thing that I think in today's society causes us the most misery. I'm talking about the Mexican wave. It spoils any game when you're watching it because you just think all these people doing the Mexican wave think they've come up with the funniest idea ever. So I've come up with the Mexican wave cancellator. It's a sort of a software system that cancels out the sight of Mexican waves. I don't quite know how it works physically, but I'm sure it will involve a sine wave.
Yes, it's bound to. Yeah.
That will sort of measure the oncoming wave, and we'll come up with a sine wave of the exact sort of frequency and wavelength in the opposite direction. And I'm sure there'll be a system of early wave detection systems in space that can tell us when a Mexican wave is about to break out. And
see, I like this because Mexican waving is basically the rudest thing an audience can do. They are essentially an audience in a sporting arena.
Yes.
And they're making their own entertainment.
Yes.
Yes. Which is just rude. And it is an improvement on my own anti-Mexican wave idea, which was basically a kind of shoot-on-sight policy. Now, we have several ideas to discuss with you, and as we go through them, we'll discover whether or not you think they're genius. At the end of the show, I'll ask you for your two favourites, and the audience will decide which of them wins this, the Genius Trophy. Oh, yeah. Now, some people have said to me, "Dave, we can't see the trophy, so how do we know it exists?" And I say to those people, you'll have to sit nearer the front next time. So, let us begin with our first idea, which comes from Gordon Parkinson, who's from Ipswich.
Dear Genius, we hear about air disasters on a regular basis. I suggest fitting a row of large parachutes along the main body of all passenger aircraft.
OK, so these are parachutes to actually carry the aircraft itself, rather than the passengers?
In an emergency, yes.
Oh, only in an emergency, right. Armando, how does this grab you?
Well, I like this idea. I mean, I'd like to know how it works and how will the parachutes be released and
if something goes wrong, if someone pulls a lever and bang, they all go out.
Now you say bang, does that mean there'll be will there be explosives on board?
It could be a very large spring.
Right.
Just sends them out.
Yes.
And it's more than one. You're saying like 4 or 5 along the body of an aircraft?
Very many small ones or one very big one.
I think it'd be funnier if it was very many small ones.
It would.
Like little toadstools.
Would it not be better to then just everyone have their own individual parachute?
There won't be time for that because the aircraft will be at that angle, won't it? You can't put a parachute on when you're at a very steep
Just
angle.
describe that angle for the listener.
It's sort of 0 degrees heading earthward.
No, yes, I mean, the question is, would people be tempted to let one off, basically, just to see what happens? That's the...
That is a slight problem, isn't it? Yes.
Oh, you mustn't say that. That undermines your argument completely.
Well, OK, so you put the parachutes in a place where only the stewardess can have access.
Yes, or...
certain members of staff, there's always going to be enough people to pull the parachutes.
Or the crew, if they're still alive.
Yes. The stewardesses were part of the crew. Not just some other travelling stewardesses from another airline, although they should be trusted. They know the game. I always thought, because it's on boats, they have lifeboats.
They do.
And I don't know why they don't have life planes on planes. If there's trouble, we all get in the smaller and more cramped plane.
I think if I was plunging to Earth in a fiery ball of metal, the last thing I want to do is get into a rubber plane.
I'm thinking I do favour the one large canopy over the whole plane thing. Yeah. As much as anything, you could sell advertising space.
Yes, you could.
Well, why not go the whole hog and have one large canopy over the plane, one large canopy under the plane, stitch the two together, call it a Zeppelin, and have the plane permanently flying inside a dirigible, basically, so that if anything went wrong, people could just get out the plane and still be airborne, but can walk around, taking the view.
Yeah.
They will have a burning wreck in the middle of the dirigible. You're in a dirigible, so there's swings and roundabouts.
I'm just giving you a tick for the word dirigible. Thank you. I mean, this seems like a very good idea to me, because if there is a plane crash, it's not just the people on board, it's where it lands that causes the problem. This is the first time I've heard a solution that actually tries to solve both of those problems, because this brings the plane down safely. This seems to be a very positive thing to me. And you seem to be quite inclined towards it as well.
Yes, I think the big plus point for it is that it will mean there are no more plane crashes. Who's going to... We're not going to have Richard Branson involved in this, are we?
Oh, good grief, no. No
good
way.
grief, no. Yeah, fine. Those are exactly the words I wanted to hear.
Professor, what do you think? Parachutes for planes, genius or not?
I think it's genius.
There you go. Fantastic. Congratulations, Gordon. You are a genius. Well done, you. So, let's see what our next potential genius has in store. He's from Leeds, and he's Richard Raftery.
Dear genius, this is Raftery's flip-flop solution. Forget ASBOs and juvenile courts. All hooligans, thugs, binge drinkers, yobs, and antisocial elements generally should have footwear forcibly removed and be replaced with brightly coloured flip-flops. It is cheap, easily understood, and would boost shares in the flip-flop industry.
Well, yeah. I'm not sure about the idea of labelling people so that everyone knows that there are criminals that walk down the street, because they tried this with Burberry a couple of years ago. And I don't think it really... Or was that their choice?
You could have colour-coded flip-flops, so the shoplifter wears electric blue, the cat burglar wears green. Any amount of ideas could be brought into the sort of flip-flop scenario in order to make it more workable.
Would you give the police the authority to march young offenders off to flip-flop shops?
I think it's a matter of burning the chosen footwear in front of them so that they are already in tears, and then the officer reaches into the back of the Panda car or whatever they drive these days, and he would have a selection of flip-flops ready to administer.
Can I just suggest a small nuance to the idea, which is espadrilles? Espadrilles?
Yes.
Slightly corky. They look funnier. And also when it rains, they soak up the rain, so they go slop.
I like that idea. We could reserve those for the habitual repeat offenders.
Yes. I think we're moving towards some sort of consensus here.
Well, yeah, although I am concerned that it's just going to drive criminals to the coast. Both the espadrille and the flip-flop very much a seaside footwear. But I just see an upsurge in beach crime.
Well, we'd have to look again at what ordinary, decent members of society actually wear to the beach, and I haven't thought that one through yet, I must confess, but the colour coding could be a possibility. The polka dots people are not arrestable because they are completely innocent.
OK.
I can't see any criminal getting around that system.
We have tried to test this out as best we can. There's a couple of guys who work on the show, Ali and Dave, and we asked them both to indulge in some antisocial behaviour. So what they did, they went out and tried to kick in a bus stop. This is Ali, who was wearing the Dr. Martin boots. Quite successful. This is Dave, not myself, another Dave, wearing flip-flops. So there's certainly...
Need I say more?
Success. Yeah, absolutely. One bus stop is still standing.
What do you do to someone who steals flip-flops? You've encountered a legal black hole there.
But, you know, it seems to have, I think, a supportive mood within the room. Is it doing anything for you, Professor?
I was initially with this, but I don't know. I think there are quite a few flaws, so I'm going to reject it, unfortunately. I'm going to be Alan Sugar here.
I'm broken-hearted.
Yeah.
Richard, I apologise. It was nice to hear from you all the same. Richard Rafferty from Leeds. This next idea is something I've been looking forward to for weeks. It comes from Edward Ridge, who's 16 and from St Albans.
Dear Genius, how about a movie version of Tetris?
It's a movie version of Tetris. My mum listens to this show. I don't know that she knows what Tetris is. In Tetris, a series of shapes, each made up of 4 squares, falls to the floor, and you have to align them in complete rows, and then they disappear. Which has only made it clearer for those who already knew what I'm talking about, I'm sure. It's very difficult to explain. Amanda, are you any closer to understanding this than I am, basically?
I like the idea. What I would particularly request is that it uses no CGI or special effects whatsoever. It is shot in an enormous warehouse with actual large metal shapes dropped from a great height.
How would you do that thing where you drop it and it goes quicker, though? Because it's just gravity.
Yes.
The actual thing would be going like that.
There'd be wires. I mean, I sound as if I'm defending the idea. and you are pulling it apart.
But, I mean, I wasn't even imagining for a moment it was a literal blocks falling from the sky. I imagined it was a more thematic thing.
Yeah.
It's like a cocktail party. Guests turn up. And when it's just enough to fit into the corner of the room, they disappear. But there's always more guests arriving.
I kind of saw the plot as like a disaster movie.
Right.
You just have giant blocks falling from the sky for...
Precisely. No one needs any of this guest nonsense.
You're right, I don't know what I was thinking. Have you thought of any casting?
Brian Blessed?
Yeah, well, he's the
square or
Yeah,
a
he's a
column?
square.
Oh, he's a square.
OK, well, if that's your line of thinking, you've got Brian Blessed for the big sort of blocky square.
Who's the 4?
Christopher Lee for the tall, thin one.
Yeah.
Darren Day for the one which is 3 in a row with one sticky up bit. You know, there's those 2 sort of S-shaped ones, and they're not identical, but they look like they might be. That's the cheeky girls. Well, I've got a version of Tetris here. What I thought is you could play Tetris, just to see if it does work as an interactive experience. Shout out advice. I think people think of Tetris as very much a solitary exercise, and you're suggesting it for a broader market than that. So we can try that. Would you like to play the game yourself?
Don't mind.
You're very welcome. Take to the stage. Please give him a round of applause. Just sit yourself down there. Have a go. Can you sit here?
Retake. It's a bloodbath, though.
I feel like we've proved our point, but I feel bad about stopping it. I feel like it needs a conclusion.
Everybody at home is going, that is the worst piece of radio.
They are, and yet, in a very peculiar way, we proved that there is mass appeal in watching Tetris. You were like watching Roman gladiators. I feel, the audience enjoyed watching Tetris, we know that much. I'm not sure if they enjoyed listening to it at home, but... Armando, let's get a decision. Is Tetris the movie?
Oh, yeah.
Genius or not?
I don't care about the listeners. The radio is the past. Tetris the movie is the future. I'm in. It's genius.
Well, our next idea comes from Callum Fisher, and he comes from Glasgow.
Dear Genius, my idea is a political philosophy, perhaps smearing into Kuwait form as a political party to be applied in a two-horse, non-PR electoral area based upon the single principle of contrarianism. The Contrarian Party automatically takes the opposite stance on any and every issue, creating a perfect inverse manifesto, making it easier for the electorate to grasp the differences between the parties. Furthermore, the lack of pretensions of consistency will lead to high levels of voter confidence, as the Contrarian Party will never have broken a promise unless the opposition says that they didn't.
Peculiarly, against a backdrop of Tetris the movie, this is making perfect sense to me. As far as I understand it, their manifesto is the same as the other party's manifesto, only with the word not at the end.
Yeah, or without the word not.
But rewritten to reverse every policy they're suggesting.
Yes.
OK. A fellow Glaswegian, Armando, is this...
Does that somehow help? Well, it sort of relies on the fact that a political party would have a point of view that one could oppose.
And the Contrarian Party, as I'm calling it, their view is always reactive. They're never creating their own opinion in the first place. So they're screwed, for example, if they're on question time and Dimbleby goes to them first. They've got nothing to say at that point.
Yes.
Right.
It boils down to, I just want to know why you think we need a party that does this.
For a laugh?
No, fair enough. You're winning me round, you know.
So this works only in a two-party system.
Yeah.
But one of the parties is just there for a laugh.
Yeah.
So, isn't that just handing power to the other existing party?
No. Because...
Just stop there.
for the last good few years, until recently, the Tory party was just there for a laugh. And they kept going.
But they took the other view, because what they did was say everything exactly the same as the Labour Party.
Which is why the Contrarian Party is a breath of fresh air.
Now you're turning into one. Now you're turning into a politician.
I did think that I should be the leader.
This is how it starts. This is not a million miles from Nuremberg, you know.
I think you should be the leader also. In fact, I'm going to ask you to be the leader in a fictional world now in which there is only one other party. You are the leader of the Contrarian Party. Armando, do you want to try and throw a few normal party policies at Callum here? See if...
I don't know. I think there should be a 20% levy raised on oil revenue from non-EC countries using North Sea oil seabeds.
I don't think that.
I think education.
I think beer.
Now, is beer the opposite of education? Some would argue the two go hand in hand.
I tend to forget an awful lot of things that I've learned when I'm drunk.
Are you drunk now?
Yes.
I think there is something in this, because if all political discussion was reduced to this level, on Newsnight, especially on This Week...
Elevated to this level.
Elevated to this level. You say elevated, I say reduced.
Well, of course you do.
I say let's call the whole thing off.
or on. Keep going, this is a great rally.
This is hurting my head. I think it's interesting philosophically. It's the idea of it actually existing that scares me. I think it gives just license to whoever's in charge to do as they please.
So you're not with me?
But it's not up to me. Professor.
Well, George Bush said, those who aren't with us are against us. And that worked. In many ways. I would like to see all political discussion on Radio 4 operate on this level. So I think it's a work of genius.
Congratulations, Callum Fisher. OK, well, it is time for our final idea of the night, and indeed of the series. It comes from Alex Bunting of Guildford.
Dear Genius, I've noticed that athletics equipment is becoming progressively more technical these days. Why don't they make running shoes with 98.2 metre high soles to enable unfit people like me to be competitive in the 100 metre sprint by means of a forward flop?
Armando, what do you make of this?
You're talking about effectively 100 metre high running shoes.
Yes.
I mean, already indoor athletics becomes an issue, doesn't it?
I mean, do you really realise how long 100 metres is? As a guide, Big Ben is 96 metres tall. It's getting close. So basically, you imagine two fathers for justice. One on top of the other on top of Big Ben. That's how high your man is. And he's falling. Sorry, you are falling from that distance. It's the certain death that I think is the biggest negative in the idea.
Now it's actually become more attractive, actually.
I mean, people who listen to the show regularly know that we often build examples of things, if we can, if it's possible. This theatre doesn't have a 100-metre high ceiling, so we weren't able to. So what we have done is built a scale model. I think most people know how tall a Playmobil man is. It's only just over an inch, something like that. We've built some shoes to scale for him. And I'm holding a man who is smaller than my thumb, and his shoes are 1.5 feet taller than me. It is absolutely impossible to make this stand up. Should we just see him fall and witness what happens? Okay, so he's on the blocks, he's ready to go, and this is a scale model, it's only Playmobil, you've got to scale this sound up in your heads at home. Here we go. It's quite a violent image, isn't it?
I mean, the other trouble I have is, like, what would the changing rooms be like?
They could just have a very large pit in the dressing room.
100-metre pit in the dressing room. Yeah. Do you not think there'll be some health and safety issues?
In your idea, you basically say, Why don't they make running shoes with 98.2 metre high soles? There is an answer. According to the IAAF rules and regulations, rule number 2 about shoes. Athletes may compete barefoot or with footwear on one or both feet. The purpose of shoes for competition is to give protection and stability to the feet and a firm grip on the ground. Such shoes, however, must not be constructed so as to give an athlete any unfair advantage.
You could argue that actually being on top of 100-metre high blocks of wood is not necessarily an unfair advantage.
There's death, there's destruction. Professor Iannucci, are the super-sized running shoes genius or not?
Well, I'd say not, because I think the whole principle of giving everyone, as you see it, a level playing field, if 100 metres above the ground, society doesn't work like that.
I'm afraid, I think we have a decision. Alex Bunting, I apologise, you're not a genius, but we thank you for coming all the same. OK, we've heard all the ideas, and we know which of them Professor Iannucci here deemed to be genius. But, Armando, which two were your favourites?
My favourites are Tetris the movie and the Contrarian Party.
In which case, I'd like to ask Edward Ridge and Callum Fisher to join me on the stage as we wheel on the audience response measuring device. OK, and all those in favour of Tetris the movie? And now all those in favour of the Contrarian Party. You were magnanimous in your own applause, Callum. I think you saw which way that was going. You are a genius tonight, but you're not the topmost genius. We thank you for coming all the same.
Thank you.
Have you had a good time?
Oh, yeah.
Do you really mean that? Because I can't tell with your idea here. And Edward Ridge, a young genius, but a genius all the same. Ladies and gentlemen, Edward Ridge. I'd like to thank Professor Armando Iannucci for being a genius guest, everyone who pitched their ideas, genius or not, and, of course, you for listening. But there's just time for a few suggestions from tonight's studio audience, which include a mousetrap to prevent other people from using your computer, hover ponies, and a system which, by implanting magnets in the foreheads of all Americans,